My name is Tony Elar Jr., and I am the founder of Captain George Mercer's Company, recreated French and Indian War Company of the Virginia Regiment. And I am with my good friend, very good friend, Marc Robinson.
My name is Marc Robinson. I am the member of the George Mercer Company, assistant quartermaster, and have been with Tony and the company for several years now.
Right. We were recreated in 2015 with Jim Moyer and my son, Anthony Elar III, and myself. And we recreated this regiment because they were here. They were at Fort Loudoun in 1756 when they were constructing this fort. And Mercer and his brother were both captains. James Mercer was a captain of the Virginia Regiment, as well as George. Unfortunately, their younger brother, John Fenton Mercer, was killed at the Battle of the Great Cacapon on Easter Sunday in 1756. He was massacred with 17 other members of the Virginia Regiment by Kilbuck, who was an Indian, half American, who went around in the 1756 era and torched the valley.
I would also add about Mercer Company, I think it is a good unit to recreate in this Winchester, Shenandoah Valley area. The Virginia Regiment was here in this area during that time, at this time, and they were all the way from up near the Potomac River, and created a chain of forts all the way down the Shenandoah Valley, almost to North Carolina. And we were over in Hampshire County. There were forts all over the place, and we're here to protect the citizens of Frederick County. So.
And it's very interesting that the regiment has done well recruiting-wise in this tri-state area, and we've attracted people who are interested in recreating and reenacting that are from this area, from the Maryland, West Virginia, and Virginia area, where troops were actually recruited for the Virginia Regiment. So it's germane to the area, and we've had a great growth. We're now on the books, 33 men and women, but we churn. Some would leave, some join, but we've had a good nucleus of about 15 to 18 members that have been with the company since our formation. We have a big event tomorrow. Not a big event, but a muster at the fort where we get together and we do some drilling, and we go over our calendar of events for year 2026. And it's still a vibrant group of reenactors. We welcome men and women. We actually have women that portray men, and with their long hair, they tie it back in a nice queue, and they look super authentic. And you never be able to tell them from a distance. At 20 feet, they fall in with us, look just like a man. But they're two interested ladies that have enjoyed the period and really actually enjoy wearing their uniform and learning how to drill. Wouldn't you say, Marc?
Yes, we enjoy having them, and they do a great job. We go to a number of local events here around the Winchester area. We occasionally go even further. For example, we'll go to Fort Harrison this year again. We've done that 2 or 3 times. The Virginia
That's
Regiment.
in Dayton, Virginia.
Dayton, Virginia. And so we go pretty much wherever we're invited to go.
Yeah, we go up and down the Valley Road. If you were to really look at the Valley Road, which stemmed from all the way from Philadelphia all the way down to the Carolinas, it's this part and this area, it's Route 11, essentially. And there were strings of forts that were created by individuals as well as the Virginia Regiment that were built principally for the local settlers when the alarm rang out, go to the stockade, go to the fort to protect themselves and their families, because there were raids up and down the valley by Indians, in addition to French soldiers and French militia that would come and torch settlers, unfortunately kill them. And some of the killings back in the 18th century were tragic. We call them Indians, they're really Native Americans, but back during the period, they were called Indians, and they were rather brutal. They'd go into settlements and unfortunately capture the women and the children and kill the men. And in some events in this area were tragic and unmerciless. So, but we've recreated the regiment. We picked George Mercer because he was in this area and a good associate of Colonel Washinton, a very educated man from the Mercer family. Mark, you have some details about it. Let's hear about him.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about George today, huh? George, I guess we could start with George. He was a son of famous Mercer, John Mercer, who was a lawyer and
from Ireland.
Yeah, and they had several brothers that became famous in themselves. He went to, as a young man, he went to William and Mary. A lot of young men of notoriety went to William and Mary, which at that time he became a surveyor before his military career. And actually William and Mary was where you got your, for lack of better words, I'm not sure I'm going to use the right word, certified you to become a surveyor. That was the official college to become a surveyor. Somebody there, William and Mary, had to.
So he surveyed like Colonel Washinton did too.
Yes,
for Fairfax.
And so after then, we get to 1754 or so, and then is when everything started happening, and the Virginia Regiment got started. And where was he first at, Tony?
I would say he was probably at Jumonville.
Yes.
With Colonel Washington. Washington was probably a colonel at that time because the original colonel, interestingly enough, Joseph Fry, who was the original colonel that Lieutenant Governor Dinwiddie appointed to be the colonel of the Virginia Regiment. His first event, their first marching event, poor Joseph Fry fell off his horse, cracked his collarbone, and then 6 weeks later died of pneumonia. So Lieutenant Governor Dinwiddie had heard of this young, dashing 21-year-old buck named George Washinton, gave him command of the Virginia Regiment, and the rest was history. Now, the name Mercer is very, very fluid during that period, even up into the American Revolution. Their second cousin, Hugh Mercer, was involved in the French Indian War and during the American Revolution. They were second cousins. And Mercer, that Mercer clan, that part of the family, settled mostly in Pennsylvania, where these Mercers were in Virginia. But please continue on George's history during the war.
Well, another interesting thing you mentioned, the first battle, if you will, that George participated in was there at at Fort Necessity, but he was also at Jumonville, as we know, Jumonville Glen, where that attack on the French at that point. So he participated in that. Then he was with George Washington, actually, at Fort Necessity.
Got wounded.
That's very important. That comes up later in his life.
Right.
We don't know that in the history until he writes about it much later. I think in the 1760s, early 70s, and he's writing.
His hand got infected from it.
It sounded like a very serious injury. He really complains about it quite a bit, you know. So, so he evidently got wounded there at Fort Necessity,
which was an interesting story in itself. Washington surrendered the fort, and the French were kind enough to allow the survivors to march out.
Yes,
and
with honors too, right?
With honors, and their colors, and they marched down. But there's a very interesting story about Fort Necessity. They built a fort. All the trees were knocked down in front of it, and they were kind of exposed. And the battle actually occurred, and unfortunately for them, a huge rainstorm, thunder and lightning storm, with torrential rain occurred during the battle. And do you know, Mark, that there was only one cleaning kit? That entire regiment.
I didn't know that.
Now, Brown Bess muskets, if we can take a little detour, are black powder muskets, and they get very dirty they foul very quickly. And there was only one cleaning kit to clean 400 muskets. So naturally, they weren't able to clean. And someone got into the collection of rum, I understand,
Yes, I think they broke it.
And what happened, Mark?
I think that
They got drunk.
Yeah, they got drunk that night, I think, yep.
And they weren't that effective. And I guess the French were kind enough to let them march with honors, and out they went.
Yep.
And that's the story of Fort Necessity.
Then the next, so George is remains in the Virginia Regiment. You know, there were several versions of the Virginia Regiment.
He's a captain.
So they recreated the Virginia Regiment, and he does not participate. The next big battle is, as we all know, is Braddock's defeat, or the Battle of Monongahela. He does not participate.
Where was he?
He was at Dunbar's camp at that time.
He stayed there.
Yes, yeah, he did. He was with the Dunbar, Colonel Dunbar, and so he wasn't at the battle in of itself.
Lucky for him.
Lucky for him, yes, yes. So then after that, we get into probably the next famous in terms of battles, and we'll go backwards maybe in terms of what else he did or his company did. But so next big thing in the French-Indian War in this area is Forbes.
Well, we should really talk a little bit about the construction of the fort.
Oh, okay, sure.
Before we get into the Forbes campaign, allow me to interrupt you. But during this period, after Braddock's defeat, after the massacres up and down the valley in 1756, the fort is being built. And Colonel Washington appoints George his aide de camp, which essentially was like an adjutant,
right?
Handled all the paperwork, dealing with some of the merchant that would come in and sell equipment and negotiate transactions. Colonel Washington, George leaned a lot on George Mercer to handle some of the paperwork in the background. So the fort's being built, and they get it constructed, and then the next part of the war, of course, in this area is that huge Forbes campaign.
The Forbes campaign, yes, yes. And I think
Who was Forbes, by the way?
General Forbes, after Bragg's defeat, the British, still wanted to take control of the Pittsburgh area. You know, that was such a vital area. The Allegheny,
the Three Rivers there,
right? And so the French were still there, and so they were
in their Fort Duquesne,
leading raids, Indian raids, up and down the Shenandoah Valley. So the British did still know how important that was. So they got General Forbes came over and led this long campaign in 1758 to chase the French out. And George...
And they didn't go on Braddock's road.
No.
They went their own way, correct?
Yeah, that was, of course, a big George Washington was very advocating for them to go up the old Braddock Road, if you will. And then the folks in Pennsylvania wanted Forbes to create a straighter line, if you will, which made some sense, a straighter line to go through Pennsylvania. Of course, George knew that
from Carlisle out straight to Western PA.
Western Pennsylvania, yep. So I think the thing to say about George, in particular Mercer, about that Forbes campaign and what he's known most for is the friendly fire incident that occurred outside of Loyal Hanna, or Fort Ligonier as it's known now. Would you like to say a little bit about the friendly fire?
No, I'd like to defer to you because you are well versed in that. You've been on many organizations in your life, right? The Braddock Road Preservation.
Yes.
You're active in that. I would much like to defer to you.
Well, that was a very important event for a number of reasons. I'll just mention two in particular. That was an occasion where the French had attacked Fort Ligonier. The commanders sent out George Mercer with some of the Virginia Regiment to go look for the French and attack the French, which they did. But the commander at the fort at the time, once they heard the gunshots off in the distance, they decided to send George Washington with another company or two of Virginia folks. And what happened was that the George Washington's troops ran into George Mercer's folks.
And it was late in the day, and I understand it was foggy and dusky.
Yep.
And vision wasn't that good.
Yep.
And what happened?
And they started firing at each other and killed several each other. And that was one of the few times. George was Washington. That is was. As we know, in the line of fire, several occasions, he supposedly ran out in between the troops
and stopped the fire
stop the
on
firing.
horseback,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And
was successful at doing
yes. Of historical note, recently, the folks up at Fort Ligonier, which is a great place to visit, they have done a lot of archaeological work trying to find that location, and they've recently found the location. Yes, that was a big thing. Now, the second thing to say about that battle, which had a more profound effect, was that, like I said, the George Mercer's folks went out and were repelling the French attack, if you will, and they captured several prisoners, French prisoners. Now, what was so important in particular about those prisoners were the day before this battle, they had a big council of war, and they decided, this was late in the year when this happened, and they decided to end the campaign for the season because it was too late. It was too late. It was late in the year. They were worried about, they didn't really fight in winter back then in this area. And so that day before, they decided,
close up shop.
We're going to stop for the year and start next year. Well, lo and behold, the prisoners that they captured, when they interrogated them, they told them about how weak Fort Duquesne was.
Really?
And there wasn't nearly as many people there as they thought.
Wasn't well provisioned,
all that sort of stuff. And so they changed their mind based upon
that info.
They changed their mind to continue on the campaign, which, as we know, was successful.
So those French fessed up and told the truth.
Yeah, I forget if they were French or British. They might have been British. There were people deserting on both sides during that.
So off they went.
Yep.
And did they capture the fort? They did.
Oh, yes, they did.
So that's the pretty much concluding the French and Indian War part of George Mercer, and then gets involved with politics. He runs for the House of Burgesses, right? And he wins. Yes.
He was from, I want to say, from 1761 to 1765. Now, of course, once we start talking about timelines, back then, the politicians, if you will, they would get elected, but they weren't always serving. So I don't think he actually served from 64, 65, because by that time he is over in England.
Why?
Well, that is a very good question.
Isn't it?
Yes, it is. You ask good questions, Tony. So after the French and Indian War, that's not after, we're still going on, but by the time we get to 58, 59, things are slowing down in terms of this area. So at this time, as we know throughout history, and especially the French and Indian War history, there were a number of individuals and groups wanting land.
Right.
And so there was one group of individuals that created a corporation that included George Washington and a number of famous people called the Ohio Company.
Ben Franklin was in it.
Yes, right? Yes. And so this Ohio Company was advocating to the British government to get a large grant of land this corporation would own
and develop.
And make lots of money through the development. So
buku bucks.
Bucks, yeah. So The Ohio Company needed a advocate, or what we would call lobbyist now, for them so George
raises his hands and said, I'll do
they
it.
talked to his father was an original member of the Ohio Company, and so he was went to London for most of his life after that.
Advocating for
the Ohio Company. That was one of his bigger jobs. But that's what he did.
But at the same time, wasn't he also appointed quartermaster for Maryland and Virginia? Where he had that dual
Yes,
role?
that was in between. Yeah.
In between.
So after the Forbes campaign,
he gets appointed by both governors of Maryland and Virginia, to become the quartermaster, which was a big job.
I don't know if governors did that. I think it might have been Stanwyck or whoever was the head of the military at that time. Yeah, not so much.
But the governors had to approve it.
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
But that was a big job, and he must have made a fair amount of money doing that.
I don't know if he made.
I'm
sure
know.
he got paid. Yeah, I don't know. He was in Pittsburgh.
Then doesn't he become the stamp and tax collector?
Well, that's a little later. Yeah.
A little later.
Yeah, it's a little later.
So what happens?
Oh, so we can talk about that. I guess. So in 1763, he is probably the first time he's going in front of the Board of Trade and advocating for the Ohio Company. He does that probably a dozen times through the years, writing these memorials, as they called them, to try to get the government to sign off on these land schemes, if you will, And his was the Ohio Company. He eventually goes into the Grand Ohio Company. That's a different. Talk about that in a minute. But
it's funny that you say land schemes.
Yeah, I call them land schemes in the terms of trying to get a lot of land
and investors. Together. Okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned, what was you mentioning?
Well, I was mentioning how.
Stamp Act, yeah.
In the Stamp Act, he ends up becoming the stamp collector.
Yeah.
Comes back from England. What happens?
So that is a good story. So in 1765, there's the famous Stamp Act, but of course,
which was developed in Parliament to pay for the war.
Yep, to help pay for.
So all that protection that the British government provided for the colonies, and all the money that was sent over, and the troops, and the guns, and the food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they said, you guys got to pay for it.
Yep.
So they have the Stamp Act.
They have a variety of acts.
Right.
And
what happens to George?
Well, of course, I think you should say, most of these acts, the colonists are not liking it all, right? And so the colonists are not liking them. They're getting perturbed, and this whole America thing is starting to get boiling up, right? And so I don't think George knew what was happening back here in the colonies at that time, how the colonists were not liking pretty much any of these acts that they were getting passed by Parliament. So poor George gets appointed as the stamp collector for Virginia. He travels, back. He's living in England,
and he gets paid handsomely too.
Yeah, it would be a great job. He gets a cut
because he's getting a cut of it.
He's getting cut in all the stamps.
Right.
And but unbeknownst to him, the colonists are not liking it, right? So he shows up. In Williamsburg.
Right. All very proud and ready to go.
Yeah. Now, prior to him showing up in Williamsburg, the month before, by this time, the Virginia folks are all up in arms about it. They even hang him in effigy in Westmoreland County, which is another story because one of the Lees arguably was trying to get that job, and he didn't get the job
because he saw the value in it.
And so he supposedly stirred up the folks there in Westmoreland County. There was some envy there
to hang George in effigy, right?
Yeah.
And George must have said,
Well, George wouldn't have known anything about it.
Wouldn't know. He was.
He
found out about it.
Well, he would have been on a ship at this time.
Right.
The month before.
But when he comes in and they tell him.
Well, so he shows up in Williamsburg. He doesn't last, I don't know how long, I'm just making this up, maybe an hour in town. And a mob of people surround him.
Wow.
Because they know who he is.
And he had no idea.
Yeah, and so they just give Term a new one, as they say, about him being the stamp collector, how terrible this is, and how he should quit it, and we're not going to put up with it. And so, bless his heart, so he got them to, other people helped settle the mob down, and he told the mob, I'll give you an answer tomorrow. And so tomorrow comes along, and he does, long story short, he does resign his commission.
And doesn't Lee play a dual role? He gets to calm down the mob.
I forgot who.
Yeah, Lee is in there too.
Okay.
Or his operatives are in there trying to calm down the mob to curry favor to George Mercer.
Yeah.
So he gets Mercer to resign.
Yeah. So now I would say though, and now that I think about it a little bit more, maybe he did know something was going to happen, because one of the interesting side notes of this event is he didn't bring the stamps with him. He left the stamps on the boat.
Wow.
So somebody must have told him,
tip the hand.
hey, people aren't happy about it.
That's unclear though.
Well, no, it's clear the stamps were left on the boat.
But we don't know
why they were left on the boat. But
interesting story. I was not aware of that.
Yeah.
So what does George do? He says, I'm getting the hell out of here, right?
Yeah. So he leaves America again.
Skedaddles and gets the next ship back to merry old England.
Merry old England, yeah.
Right. And interesting sideline, George at the time, and we can only thank Mr. Jim Moyer, may rest in peace, has told us that George was married at that time too.
Yeah.
And then, for lack of a better expression, either abandons his wife or divorces her and goes to England as a single man. And we don't really know what happened to the wife. They had a child that might have had autism or was on the spectrum, and eventually that child was put into a home. We don't know what happened to the wife. And George considered them servants.
Right, he framed it, yeah.
He framed his wife and his offspring as servants as opposed to my wife and my daughter.
Yeah, that's why.
So we know there might have been a little misogyny there.
Well, did you know this too? Because that's why it's hard to tell sometimes how many times he was married, because of how he's framing his letters about
So
his
do we
wife.
think he's married 3 times or 2 times?
Maybe 3, because here's another. Did you know this one? He supposedly married a woman prior to that.
Really?
The one you're talking about. And what's interesting is, which doesn't necessarily make sense, but it was written in some of the letters in the newspapers, that his wife, the year after getting married, came back to America by herself and supposedly died there in Richmond.
Now, George, it's a shame we don't have the picture, but George was a dashing fellow. For him, quite a handsome man, so he managed to finagle himself into 3 marriages.
Yeah, must have.
And came out unscathed.
Yeah. So he goes back to England after the Stamp Act thing, and he still is. Here's a man that knows a lot of people, has done well for himself, comes from a good family, and arguably things should have went really well for him. But things start, wheels start falling off the car or
off the cart.
Yeah, it just it doesn't necessarily end up too well for George.
He had some misfortune.
Yeah, a lot of misfortune. Now he went back to England. He still must know people.
Right. Still advocating for the Ohio Company.
Still advocating for the Ohio Company.
Still trying to get back pension money from the colony of Virginia, which he claims.
Well, yeah, we're going to get into that. Yeah,
Right.
well, yeah. So, but what I want to say was he still has enough connections where he's offered the job as lieutenant governor for North Carolina.
Nice position.
Yeah. The problem is they refuse it because they aren't going to pay. So there wasn't going to be any pay for it.
Wow.
Which
A
I
pro
don't
bono
understand
job to be
yeah.
lieutenant governor.
Yeah, which I'm not sure makes sense, but
I'm sure he turned it down.
and that's why he turned it down.
Right.
So he turned that down. Then I think in about 1770, for folks that talking about land schemes, of course there were a lot of these groups, the Walpole, there's a lot of groups, but there was going to be a new colony created, Vandalia. And I think in 1770, if my memory serves me correctly. And George is going to be the governor of that colony.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that Vandalia doesn't pan out, so to speak. But,
Yeah, and from what I read is that they named it Vandalia to curry favor with King George III because his wife was connected to the Vandals.
right, supposedly came
So
from
that's
the
where they
Vandals.
named it Vandalia.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting.
So he's going to do that, make a new colony, and become the governor.
Right. So, but that doesn't pan out either. So that's probably that's the end of a lot of his good fortune.
Then
By
the
this-
bad stuff started happening.
Yeah, by this time, so now we start getting into the 1770s, even as early as the 1760s, late 60s, you can see he's having financial problems. There's just a lot of money problems
A lot
going
of
on.
debt.
A lot of debt. He has bought land, a lot of land.
Good land on the Potomac. He owns some
okay.
nice land.
I know he owned land over in Clark County.
Loudoun and Clark.
Yeah,
Right on the river.
I think he had a lot in Alexandria. We were talking about
Mm-hmm.
Alexandria a little bit earlier. So he's bought mortgage. He's bought land from different people, and so a lot of things I think aren't going well. He's not really getting paid for his
Efforts.
efforts for the Ohio Company.
Mm-hmm.
These land schemes, Ohio Company, the Grand Ohio Company, none of them really ever pan out.
Meaning there's no money coming his way.
Yeah,
Right.
they don't end up getting much money. Now, some of he does eventually get some land along with some of the other original folks of the Virginia Regiment from the 1754 situation where Governor Dinwiddie promised
The original, the gang of 1754, right?
Yeah, that if you joined the Virginia
You got
Regiment,
what-
you were
got
going to get land.
Right.
So that eventually panned out in the well, I don't think it really panned out till the 1770s, but
Right.
But so he's not getting.
And then the Rev War starts happening,
Yeah.
and everything's thrown off the table.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's not getting any money. His lands say like over there in the Shenandoah, along the Shenandoah River here in Clark County, which he had thousands of acres there, are not producing a lot of money, so to speak. So through a whole arguably a wide range of circumstances, not enough money coming in, too much money going out. So his empire, if you will, starts
upside
collapsing.
down.
He's upside down.
Right.
He, bless his heart, he ends up in debtor's prison.
Yeah, what a tragic story.
Yeah.
So there's George Mercer, who came all this way, all this great history, great family, ends up in debtor's prison.
Ends up in debtor's prison and running. He runs. He's escaping a lot. He goes to France to try to escape debts. He ends up in Paris for a while, trying to escape debts over in London.
But then they got him back.
Got him back. And he eventually passes away.
So what is this? He dies in 1784, right?
Yes.
So he must be in his 60s about this time. Yeah.
I think 50s probably.
Okay. So he was born in 1733. He dies in 84, in his late 50s.
Yeah.
And he's in debtor's prison, and he goes back to England. He's got no money.
Yeah.
He's talking about his hand hurting again.
Yeah.
Got all super infected. He wrote to Washington about that. And and he's got his third wife, right?
Yeah.
She must be trying to take care of him, but they don't have much money. She wasn't wealthy, right?
Yeah, as far as we know.
No. And so he's late in life for the era. And what happens? He dies.
He dies supposedly of some form of mental illness, which we don't know at this point. But he passes away. He doesn't become. I think about what if he would have ended up, if he would have stayed here in the colonies.
But he was a Tory, though. That was the issue. He couldn't have stayed here in the colonies. He would have had to have joined the Loyalists, I'm sure.
Well, I'm thinking if he wouldn't have become an agent of the Ohio Company and would have stayed here in America like lots of other, like George Washington.
If he became an agent, right.
If he wouldn't have become an agent.
He wouldn't have become an agent.
Yeah,
but
and got a
he had those
job.
strong Tory feelings, though, because he wanted to go back to Mother England.
Yeah. He was receiving a pension. He did receive a pension.
But his debts overwhelmed him.
Yes. Yeah, he even had several mortgages on his properties, and him and his brother, James.
Who eventually becomes, Supreme Court Justice of the colony.
He's famous in his own right,
Very
James.
famous and wealthy in his own right. But George dies penniless, sick, and is buried in London.
Did we talk about, I think you might have mentioned earlier, but we might have been remiss, I think you did, but he had another, so James is one of his brother, John Fenton is one of his brother, who was, talk about that one more time, about the Fort Edward situation.
The youngest, John Fenton Mercer, he was killed at, they call it Mercer's Massacre, if you want to Google it one day. The whole story will come up, how that massacre occurred. What do you want to know about it, Mark?
Tell me the story of how the Indians tricked the guys out of the fort.
It's quite a story, how they tricked Fenton Mercer's company of Virginia Regiment, probably about 20 guys. They tricked them by cutting a little hole in the haversack with dried corn, which men would carry dried corn to eat. They would cook it in hot water and make a stew out of it. And they cut a little hole in the haversack and dropped it. So Fenton Mercer's company follows that, figuring they got a lead on where the Indians were going. So they go into the woods and follow it and get involved in this hollow and are ambushed and all killed, and unfortunately were left there, and Washington got wind of the massacre and sent another company back, go get and retrieve those bodies, and especially Captain John Fenton Mercer. And they hear Indians or Native Americans, they think they do, and they never actually retrieve those bodies with the site of the massacre. And that would be a great archaeological dig, to find the site of that skirmish and ambush, which is still there, no doubt, in Hampshire County, just northwest of Cacapon, the Great Cacapon.
Yeah, there are people that think they know where that battle occurred.
Yeah, it would be nice to get there. It's on private land, part state land. But that massacre, interestingly enough, which took place on Easter Sunday in 1756, even made the front page of the London Times.
Yeah.
3 months later, they were reading about that tragic massacre in Hampshire County.
And one of the reasons why we know so much about that particular battle or massacre, which I appreciate, is whereas like a lot of battles, we don't know a lot of the details, but we know quite a few of the details of that battle because there were a number of court-martials that occurred.
Right.
Because they were some of the soldiers supposedly dropped their weapons
and
ran, right? So there were 4 or 5 different court-martials and a lot of documentation about what people said that occurred.
Testimony
about the battle.
Court-martials, tribunals, as they were known as. And so that battle was recorded. It's sad that they haven't found the actual site, although the folks at the Fort Edward Foundation are really good about preserving the overall site. Eventually, maybe within our lifetimes, someone will go to that and actually find the site of Mercer's Massacre.
And let's close with one more thing, and we'll One more thing about his family. Oh, go ahead. You were going to say something?
I just wanted to close with one more thing and defer to our good friend James Moyer. He called him, he could have been a contender.
Yes. Because, he liked to say that, because
he had everything.
He had a lot going for him.
Right.
He had a lot of good connections. He did a lot of good deeds. But it just...
Good-looking man.
Yeah.
And... but he could have been a contender, but just never made it.
Just didn't make it, yeah.
And there was a lot of competition around the period.
Yeah.
But he was within the right mix of people with George Mason, his father's connection, certainly right-hand man to George Washington, but unfortunately stumbled along the way. It's a sad story. It would be a great movie.
Yeah, it would be, yeah.
It's a shame Stanley Kubrick isn't alive today. He could be parallel Barry Lyndon.
Right.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was an outstanding discussion that Mark, you and I have had. I am very respectful of your diligence in reading about George Mercer in his later time. Naturally, being more of a reenactor, I'm very interested in the early part of his life in the reenacting. But you've done some great research on Mercer.
I learn more every day. Every time you get reading, they're just... all the land he's bought.
What's your famous quote? The more you know, the more you don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you know, the more you find out you don't know.
Right.
And so...
and if anybody's interested in finding more about Mercer and or our regiment and the company, you should really follow up and join the French Indian War Foundation. There are a group of scholars that are involved in the history of the French Indian War, principally in this area. And it's online at FIWF, the French Indian War Foundation, which handles and maintains the site of Fort Loudoun, what's left of it. And we thank you very much and very honored to be here this afternoon.